Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Senator Merkley and I are releasing our report and findings from our recent trip to Israel, to the West Bank, to the border of Gaza, both the Egypt-Gaza border, the Israeli-Gaza border, and also our visits in Jordan and in Egypt. Before I discuss our report, I want to mention two other matters. First, yesterday, our country witnessed the horrifying political assassination of Charlie Kirk. My heart goes out to his wife and his two children. Political disagreements should never result in political violence. Violence has no place in our politics. Today, we also observe the somber anniversary of 9/11. We remember those whose lives were lost. We salute those who rushed toward danger, sacrificing themselves to save others. After that attack, our country rallied together to meet a common challenge. We need that spirit of unity today to meet huge challenges here at home and around the world. One of those is the conflict in the Middle East, including the horrific humanitarian disaster in Gaza today. Senator Merkley and I have been clear and unwavering in our position from the start that Israel has the right and the duty to defend its people after the horrific terror attacks by Hamas on October 7th. But from our trip, from our observations, from our firsthand accounts, it's clear that the Netanyahu government has gone far beyond targeting Hamas to imposing collective punishment on all the people of Gaza. The title of our report is "The Netanyahu Government is Implementing a Plan to Ethnically Cleanse Gaza of Palestinians. America is complicit. The world must stop it." The Netanyahu government has not kept its goals secret. And we start in this report by quoting members of the Netanyahu government, including Prime Minister Netanyahu himself, who has said that one of their war aims is the removal of the Palestinian population from Gaza. I urge all of you to read those quotes because what now they're doing and what we witnessed is putting those goals into action in Gaza. We visited the Egyptian-Gaza border, and Senator Merkley and I had been there back in January 2024. And at that time, on the Gazan side of the border, was the thriving Palestinian town of Rafah. This time, when we went to that border, we were able to climb up a taller building and actually look directly into Gaza. And what we saw with respect to Rafah was rubble. And you can see from this photo that Senator Merkley took that you could see it with your naked eye. And when you got your binoculars, you could see the city of Rafah, which had been home to about 210,000 people, Palestinians, reduced to rubble. We also met with some very courageous souls, people with true moral courage, people who had served in the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, and served in Gaza, who told us that they had been part of this systematic destruction of civilian infrastructure. Our report goes into some of the figures, but just for example, 90% of the homes in Gaza have been destroyed or severely damaged. And in our interviews and through our observations, it was clear that the Netanyahu government is also restricting the delivery of humanitarian assistance into Gaza, including using food as a weapon of war. I'm going to briefly summarize some of our findings. I urge you to look at the details in the report with respect to restricting food getting into Gaza, and then Senator Merkley will talk about the challenges of getting that food distributed within Gaza to people who are starving there as we speak. If you look at our table of contents, and we've just passed out the report to many of you, we break the restrictions on food into Gaza into a number of parts. I'm just going to read them and not go into great detail, but I think it's important to understand the level of specifics in this report. We start with the 78-day total blockade of food and humanitarian assistance to Gaza. That ran from March 2nd to May 19th. And as a result of that, you had a huge amount of people starving to death in Gaza. One of the things we heard loud and clear is, in order to address that problem right now, is to open more crossings into Gaza. There are two that are regularly open, Kerem Shalom, which we visited, and Zakim. There are two others that the international organizations have pushed to have open as regular crossings, not sporadic crossings, in order to get more food into Gaza. That has not happened yet. There are, in addition, the advent of this so-called Gaza Humanitarian Initiative. And Senator Merkley will speak more to this. This is when, after that total siege on food, the blockade on food, instead of reopening the normal UN delivery system, they moved toward this system with private contractors, private security folks, opened just 4 sites for 2 million people, 3 of them in southern Gaza, none of them in the north, clearly designed to use food as a method of population control as they try to push the Palestinian population out of northern Gaza. And of course, we're witnessing right now the military operation there. We also point out deliberate obstacles at the Israeli port of Ashdod, the deluge, the just mountain of unnecessary requirements and red tape that slow down the delivery of food into Gaza, the failure to protect convoys along what's called the Jordan corridor. There are a couple major corridors for getting food in. One is through Jordan, and we go through in great detail all the restrictions put on getting food in through that corridor. Another, of course, is the Egyptian corridor through Rafah, and that goes through Kerem Shalom. Huge restrictions there as well. No clear list of banned and dual-use items. So, for example, when we spoke to the Jordanians, they said you could never predict what would be denied entry. And they had just learned, for example, that peanut butter and honey and dates could no longer be part of a convoy. And when a truck is turned around for one item that is restricted, they have to turn the whole truck around. And you'll see a great amount in this report about the detail of the huge amount of very deliberate red tape intended to restrict the flow of humanitarian aid and food. I will just highlight one example. It was one of our early stops at the port of Ashdod. This is a port, Israeli port north of Gaza, and it's the sort of receiving point for the World Food Program of food that's offloaded to be distributed to Gaza. They told us very clearly that because of unnecessary restrictions that have been recently imposed since the end of the blockade, 2,200 shipping containers worth of food were being unnecessarily blocked right there. Enough food to feed everyone in Gaza for 3 weeks. That is just one example, but it's part of the larger theme that we heard throughout about deliberate obstacles placed in the way of getting food to people in Gaza. I'll end with this. The Netanyahu government is now, talking about how their plan is the, quote, voluntary removal, transfer of Palestinians out of Gaza. If you read this report and you look at what's happening on the ground, you recognize how cruelly cynical that phrase is. There's nothing voluntary about wanting to depart when your home is gone, when your agricultural fields are no longer accessible and no longer arable, when your schools are gone, when all your cultural facilities are gone, when the city of Rafah is reduced to rubble. And so we, the United States, are complicit in all of this. because we're providing lots of taxpayer dollar support to the Netanyahu government to use weapons in Gaza, 2,000 bombs and other weapons. We have said that must stop given what's happening right now in Gaza. We were critical of the Biden administration for not doing enough, and now the Trump administration is providing the Netanyahu government with a blank check of American taxpayer dollars to fund and support the horrible things that are happening right now in Gaza. The world must end this, and we will do everything in our power to make that happen. And now let me turn it over to a good friend and colleague and somebody who is determined both to shine a spotlight on what's happening, but determined also to end the war and bring the hostages home. Our very last meeting our very first public meeting, I should say, in Israel was with the hostage families, many of them. We met in Hostages Square in Tel Aviv. Their message to us was clear, that Netanyahu has prioritized his political survival over the survival of our loved ones. We believe that to be true. We need to end the war. The United States needs to do its part to end this war now and to bring the hostages home now. Senator Merkley.
Thank you very much, Chris. And no one in the Senate has spent so much time and effort to be fully educated about the dynamics in Gaza, the West Bank, in Israel, in Jordan, in Egypt. So thank you so much for your leadership. I want to emphasize that this strategy of ethnic cleansing in Gaza has these two main components. One component is to destroy homes so that they cannot be returned to. Despite having seen the city reduced to rubble through satellite photos, to climb an outside staircase, fire escape to the top of a 3-story building, stand on a ledge, look over, and see this city reduced to rubble, that was extraordinarily powerful to just bear witness to that strategy that's being implemented. Not long ago, as Chris said, 1 million people were here, many of them refugees from other parts of Gaza. That second strategy deprived Palestinians of essentials to live: food, water, medicine. And the piece of this that receives the most attention is the food factor. And Chris has described obstacles about getting food into Gaza. But even after you get it into Gaza, getting it to the people most in need is extremely challenging. If you think about what we were told in our first trip by international organizations, they said, look, if food gets to a certain low level where families are starving, groups will start to raid the trucks before they get to the warehouses. They'll break into the warehouses and raid those. Then they'll start raiding the trucks en route to the warehouse, because that's what you see everywhere in the world when people are starving. Well, that's exactly what we see in Gaza. But now think about the fact that those who are in most trouble in terms of nutrition are those who are the weakest, and that is the children, that is the disabled, that is the seniors, that is the mothers who are pregnant, the mothers who have recently given birth. But to get food to those populations, you have to be able to have an organized system through the warehouses. There is a special supplement for starving children. In much of the world, it goes by the brand name Plumpy Nut. But other companies produce it and call it things like nutritional supplement. A truck full of nutritional supplement, if it is raided en route to a warehouse, that nutritional supplement doesn't get to the children who need it. So what we learned from the international groups is they said the way that you solve this is you flood Gaza with food. And we saw this happen during the ceasefire. We had suddenly 600 trucks a day moving food into Gaza. And when people knew that they were going to be able to access food, they didn't need to raid the trucks, and then you were able to start reestablishing the supply of food to those who need it most. So under this strategy in which food is deliberately restricted by the Netanyahu government, we're going to continue to see children, women, elderly, disabled, starving. And this is the heart of the famine that is there right now. The second thing I want to emphasize is we have a few chapters in the course of this year. We have the chapter of the ceasefire from January 19th to early March, March 1st. Then we have this full blockade from March 2nd through May 19 that produced a hugely accentuated level of starvation. And then we have the third chapter in which Israel, in response to the world, said, yes, we're getting food in, and we have this great system, this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, GHF strategy. And as Chris described, that strategy was to open 4 sites, not the hundreds of sites that existed through the United Nations distribution system, but 4 sites. Think about that, 4 sites to cover 2 million people, with 3 of the 4 deliberately located just in one corner in the south. The goal of that was, hey, if you're in Gaza City, somewhere to the north, the only place we're going to get food to you is if you go to the south. This is part of that strategy of displacement. That strategy has not worked well. According to a report by a humanitarian group, they recorded 1,373 people killed from May 22nd to July 31st, the bulk of those happening in the vicinity of those 4 distribution sites. Another group called this not aid, but orchestrated killing. Who would ever come up with an idea to replace hundreds of sites where people can access it to 4 sites in the south? Think about whether or not a mother who is already malnourished is going to be able to walk miles to one of those sites, maybe carrying a child, and somehow lift a 40-pound box and make it miles home. I mean, clearly this was a strategy that was not meeting the moment in any possible way, but a continuation of a strategy of food deprivation. Ethnic cleansing through destroying homes, ethnic cleansing through deprivation of food, water, and medicine. And now we have Gaza City. Gaza City is en route to looking like this. Rubble. Just as there were 1 million people gathered in Rafah, the regular population plus folks who had fled from elsewhere in Gaza, and now it's rubble, there are 1 million people in Gaza City. And in a few months, it may look like this. What does that mean if we look down the lane? Well, it means 2 million people clustered in tents, without a food distribution system, without a clean water system, without a sanitary system, without a power system, without a communication system, without a roof over their head, with the goal of pushing people out of Gaza. And the United States is engaged in conversations to help find places where people might be shipped to. The United States has to quit being complicit in this ethnic cleansing, has to quit being complicit in this war crime.
Thanks, Jeff. We're happy to take any questions that you have. Yes.
Thank you, Senators. Eric Martin with Bloomberg News. I wanted to ask you about your conversations with the Trump administration, or your recommendations to the administration as to where U.S. policy should go from here, what leverage the U.S. should be putting on the Israeli government, the Netanyahu government, or what what the U.S. Request and urging should be to the government at this point in terms of its policy towards Gaza City and towards Gaza overall?
Sure. As you saw, our conclusion is not only that the Netanyahu government is committing ethnic cleansing in Gaza, but the United States is complicit. We're complicit because we have effectively given the Netanyahu government a blank check. No restrictions, no red lines. And the Trump administration has therefore facilitated this. We were both critical of the previous administration for not doing enough. So the United States has the kind of leverage as a partner to be able to use our influence to end this war and bring the hostages home. I mean, after all, on the campaign trail, Donald Trump said on day one he was going to end the war in Gaza. He hasn't come close, and the reason he hasn't come close is he has refused to put the kind of pressure and use our leverage with respect to the Netanyahu government that we can do it. And if you talk to the, you know, if you as we did, if you talk to hostage families, and I think recent polling in Israel indicates this is the view of the majority of the people of Israel, that Netanyahu essentially prioritized his own political survival over the survival of the hostages and the end of the war. Yes.
Stephen Gross with AP. I'm wondering, from the Senate and acknowledging that you're in the minority, what can be done? Are you expected to have any resolution votes or anything of that sort? Just following up on this.
Sure. Well, both of us are members of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and both of us are members of the Senate Appropriations Committee. And in both those committees, there are opportunities to put things to a vote and make sure that people are on the record. In the Senate in the Foreign Ops Committee, the Appropriations Committee, that is where a lot of the funding is to support military assistance to Israel and to the Netanyahu government. That's also where the administration we suspect, would get the funding to support something like the GHF. So we will be looking at opportunities there to hold the Netanyahu government accountable and try to get desperately needed humanitarian assistance and food to people in Gaza.
It is significant that in the last two votes we had on arms sales in the U.S. Senate, 27 senators said we shouldn't be providing rifles. Those rifles are used both in Gaza and on the West Bank. The West Bank is an additional story in which there is now a green light for settlers to hugely attack Palestinian villages in a systematic way, cutting them off from olive orchards, from vineyards, from springs, from wells. Our report today is about Gaza, but to have half of the Democratic caucus vote, more than half, vote against an arms sale, you would not have expected that 2 years ago. I've been throughout my life a passionate supporter for Israel, believing in the vision of a homeland for the Jewish people, believing that they had hostile neighbors, and wanting to do everything I can to help strengthen them. But the same values that made me a champion for Israel compel me to say what they are doing to the Palestinians, both in West Bank and in Gaza, is absolutely wrong. And I do hope we can press internationally for two states, for two people. I still believe it's the best way for peace and prosperity for both Israelis and Palestinians.
Yes. Hey.
Patricia Zimmerman from Reuters. Do you think that incidents in the U.S. reaction, like the attack on Doha yesterday or the day before, time, right, will have any influence? I mean, there were reports that, and the president said that he was unhappy about it. Do you think that that will have any influence on the attitude toward helping Gaza, or are the two things just separate?
It's hard to read the minds of the Trump administration. We've been following their statements on the attacks that took place in Doha. It does make clear and should make clear to the Trump administration, if they didn't already realize it, that the Netanyahu government is not interested in a negotiated settlement that brings the hostages home and ends the war. I mean, it's been pretty clear from the beginning that Netanyahu is a servant to the most far-right extreme elements in his coalition, who have threatened to leave his government if he was to end the war in Gaza at this point. So I hope that the Trump administration wakes up. Netanyahu has played Donald Trump beautifully through all of this. I hope that some of the more recent actions they've taken are a wake-up call.
If I could have the confidence of Trump, if I thought he would listen to me, I would say draw a red line right now on Gaza City. Tell Israel, we're not going to provide economic aid. We're not going to provide weapons, offensive weapons, if you continue this assault. The hostage families are clear that if a campaign taken many months goes forward on Gaza City, there's a very high chance that their loved ones who are still alive will not be alive by the end of it. Good chance that they're being held in Gaza City. Good chance that they won't live a few more months being moved repeatedly, just as those who are with them are moving to escape bombs. And use that power to create a permanent ceasefire now. It's a ceasefire that enables the hostages to get home. It's a ceasefire that stops the massive deaths of women and children. It is a ceasefire that allows in humanitarian aid and therefore the ability to stop the famine. It is a ceasefire that allows negotiations towards a better future.
I want to just say amen to everything that Jeff Merkley just said. If you think back a number of years, the Biden administration actually drew what it described as a red line with respect to Rafah. He said that if the IDF went into Rafah, too fast and just destroyed it, it would create a humanitarian disaster. Well, Rafah's been reduced to rubble. We need to establish very clearly, as Senator Merkley said, that continuing the demolishment and attacks on Gaza City are unacceptable. And then we need to back it up. We need to back it up by using U.S. influence in the way that we've said, to do what Donald Trump said he was going to do on day one, end the war and bring the hostages home. I do just want to say, with respect to the West Bank, and we have a little bit in this report on the West Bank. It is not the focus of the report, but both of us, have been there in prior years, and you can see the changes rapidly taking place in terms of more illegal settlements, trailers on the top of hills, Palestinians being pushed off of their lands. And in this report, we do describe what's happening on the West Bank as ethnic cleansing in slow motion. The bottom line is that the United States needs to play its leadership role in the world with a country that has been our longtime partner, as Senator Merkley indicated. And a partnership has to be a two-way street. It's not like a one-way road. And the United States has interests in bringing an end to this horrible conflict and bringing the hostages home. We have strategic interests. We have moral interests as a country that says we stand up for human rights around the world. And so really this is the time to use that influence to end the war and bring the hostages home. So thank you all very much for being here, and we urge everybody to read the report. There's a lot of detail in here that we were not able to cover in the time we have. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.